Okay, hi everybody, I'm Bill. This is absolutely the best panel of the day, so congratulations for making a good choice. Like, way to go. We absolutely have, like, doesn't matter if you want to go into teaching or not, at least you went to a good panel in your life, and this is it. So really glad, and with that word, we'll say, we're gonna go into introductions, and they wanted us to know, we are gonna mic up, and we're gonna blast these people out of the building if we have to. So, can you hear the buzz of these guys? So here we go. So they said we're gonna start at 4:15 and go, or 3:15 and go to 4:30. So is everybody cool with that? All right, so let's start. So we'll do introductions, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves and talk about their career path and why they chose education. And this group of people up here, incredible. This is fantastic.
Hi everyone, Curran Goyle, if you're okay, I'm not going to use the mic. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PrepMe. We're a personalized learning company. We started in the college readiness space, have some customers and ex-customers here at the table. Hopefully get them all on board as current customers. And we started out in the personalized learning space. And really the fundamental insight when I was actually coming to Chicago as an undergrad in 2001 was looking out into the world and realizing that we live in a world where we have fantastic technology, but how are we leveraging that technology in the classroom? And I think traditionally, people have viewed education as either you are an educator and you are in education, or you are trying to revolutionize education. So there ends up being this mindset in startups that are educationally focused, which is about, well, it's an antagonistic view of the educational establishment. I think that's a great failure. And so we said, how do we, and don't get me wrong, we didn't have all these ideas then. We had to think through them. And are still doing that. So, actually, I guess I need to use the mic because those guys are so loud.
I know.
All right, so
our panel's best, and it might have to be loudest if we can't figure this out. But I know.
So what we really wanted to think about is how do we personalize the learning experience, and how do we take all the different modes of education that exist and integrate ourselves in a way that we can make education more productive. So, for those of us who grew up in fortunate households, when you had an issue with something, your parents could afford to get you a tutor, and that tutor could come and give you one-on-one support. And I was fortunate to grow up in a household. Both my grandmothers were teachers. I was fortunate that my parents spent a lot of time. I was an only child. I was lucky. And whenever I needed help with homework, there was someone there who could say, okay, let's sit down. Let's review this concept. Let's help you understand it. Unfortunately, a lot of students, in fact, the vast majority of students, are not fortunate enough to have those resources. And when I was thinking about how do we get there, I think, and I think the rest of the panel will agree with me here, first of all, we have a huge shortage of effective, really well-trained educators, not just in the United States, but worldwide. If you think of the developing world, I'm originally from India. If you think about the challenges of educating from a society where only let's say the top 5% got an education, now saying how do we educate everyone, but not having enough teachers to send out into all the rural areas and all the cities. And so we were thinking about how do we create technological solutions that allow instructors to get leverage in the classroom? How do we take technology and make it more productive? So let me be a little bit more granular than this. The idea behind PrepMe is, let's say all of us are in a classroom together. This is a large lecture environment, and the class is not particularly personalized. The way we view what we're trying to do at PrepMe is to figure out what each student needs help with. And the idea is, let's let humans do what humans are really good at, which is interaction, debate, motivation, labs, looking at student essays and giving critiques and feedbacks. And let's use technology to do what technology is really good at, which is algorithmic analysis of where people stand, delivering specific forms of instructional materials to what each student needs. So let's say here on this panel, I'm the dummy on the panel. We've got some people who are really good at math, some people who are really good at reading, some people who are really good at science. There's no reason for the people who are really good in an area to have to learn the exact same thing that all of their classmates learn, right? And we're not saying that there's obviously a very large role for the classroom, but we're saying how can we allow teachers to help as many students as they can in a classroom. So for a regular instructor, when you're sitting in a classroom, you might be lecturing on a specific topic, and there are some students who are behind where you are in class, and they're getting left behind. There are some students who are ahead of where you are in class, and they're twiddling their thumbs and perhaps getting disengaged because the class is not challenging to them. Everyone seems to think that gifted students have it really great, but if you look at where the sort of gifted funding in America is, a lot of gifted students actually drop out of high school. And I'm not saying that they're the ones that we always think about, but there are students on both ends of the spectrum that are being left behind because they're not getting the support that they need. So the idea with PrepMe is, let's let instructors have the resources to understand where their class stands. Let's give them real-time data and feedback to understand, this is where my students are, how can I help them the best? So for example, if you were an instructor using PrepMe, it would tell you that 85% of your students have not mastered the concept of absolute value. You can now take that data along with all the other information you have and think about, how do you modify and improve your lesson plan, right? This class you have this year is different from the one you had last year. How do you improve your lesson plan to focus on this class? Then you might have certain students that have areas for improvement that none of the other students have. You would love to take the time out of the classroom to help those students, and you probably are already doing it. You're answering emails on weekends and on nights, but there are only so many hours in the day and only so many opportunities that you have to work one-on-one with students. The idea is you should leverage PrepMe there to work one-on-one with those students in those areas which you don't have time to work on in the classroom.
Yep.
All right. So that's just a little summary of PrepMe. We started out, I started the company right out of college, well, college and business school. I went to college, graduated in 04, went to the GSB, or now Booth, graduated in 06. We won the business plan competition. We're very fortunate. The university was incredibly supportive, gave us free office space and startup funding. How much time do we have?
None.
Okay. All right. But anyway, we're here now, 50,000 students, 20 employees, growing about 300% year on year. Yeah. Thanks.
So before I start, I'll say that I went to high school with Karen, and he's been very business savvy from day one. He used to have monopolies on all the pizza sales when we were like 15 and 16 years old. So if you want to talk to him about business also, he's been doing it from literally, I think, the time he came out of the womb. That said, I'm Carrie Robertson. I'm the Chicago Executive Director of Pure Health Exchange. And I graduated from the college in 06. I was an English major, which I typically say gave me no tangible skills, but taught me how to think, which was good. I went on to be a Teach for America Corps member in New York, so I taught 7th grade literacy, English and language arts, to 7th graders in the Bronx, middle school 390. And that experience, I know a lot of you probably have questions about TFA, was incredibly rewarding and incredibly challenging, and I'm happy to flesh that out further with all of you. But what really got to me when I was in the classroom was less the academic, the achievement gap, which I thought was going to be the most compelling thing that I really wanted to tackle while I was in the classroom. What I saw that I really did want to tackle was all of the health issues that were going on in the classroom. So I actually had 14-year-olds sitting in my 7th grade class that had children, 1-year-old or 2-year-old children that they were going home to. And I think the big turning point for me when I realized what I wanted to address with the next 10 years of my life, or however long it may be, was when I caught 2 students passing a note in my first year of teaching. And the note said, the first girl said, "Are you going to have sex with him?" And the second girl responded, "Well, I want to, but I'm scared I'm going to get pregnant." And I was like, okay, good, thinking about that. And the first girl said back, "Well, don't worry about it. All you have to do is take a bath afterwards and you can't get pregnant." And for me, that was a really striking moment to realize that there really isn't the knowledge in some of these communities of what it takes to protect yourself. So that, coupled with the fact that I was on the 3rd floor of a building that didn't have an elevator, and many of my students, because of the huge rates of obesity, had a really hard time getting to the top of those 2 flights of stairs to my classroom and had to pause. Those 2 issues combined really made me want to go out and provide health education, which I think with all the budget cuts in education no longer exists from the departments of education, or exists in some very small and not supported way. So coming out of Teach for America, I was looking for something that was going to address this need, and I found Pure Health Exchange. And our mission is to give teenagers the knowledge and skills they need to make healthy decisions. And we do this by training college students like you guys to teach comprehensive health education in public high schools that lack health. So Christian in the back, who organized all this, is the co-coordinator this year at University of Chicago. This is a perfect opportunity for me to take some time to advertise that we have 68 volunteers this year at U of C of the 278 volunteers we have in the city. And it's a really great organization. If you're interested in teaching, you actually get to go in. You're not mentoring, you're not tutoring. You're actually a classroom teacher in a typical classroom, or a regular classroom throughout the day. It's mandatory for the students. And you stand in front of that class and you teach for 45 minutes. So if you're interested in teaching, not just because it's what I do, but also because I think it's a really good experience. I encourage you to get involved in Peer Health Exchange on U of C's campus. So I, as the Chicago Executive Director, manage all of the volunteers at University of Chicago and Northwestern, as well as manage the other staff people in the Chicago office. And probably the biggest part of my job at this point is to do fundraising. I manage the local board of overseers here and am responsible for raising a $500,000 budget. So I think it's interesting to think about, when I got involved in nonprofit and in teaching, I never really thought of fundraising as something that I would do, but it's such an integral part in nonprofit and what we do, and I'm happy to talk more about that at some point as well.
Okay. Thanks, Carrie. Candace.
My name is Candace Wang. I graduated from the college with an economics and international studies degree, and I also did Teach for America in New York City. I taught high school math in Brooklyn, and also my first week on the job was weaseled into teaching a course of Chinese, which I have no actual degree in, so that was fun. Part of the reason I wanted to do Teach for America is because of my experience at the University of Chicago. I think one of the hallmarks of Chicago is that we want to be involved in the Hyde Park community. We want to, we have a sense of social responsibility. And so as an undergrad, I participated in the Neighborhood Schools program, which goes into the local public schools, does tutoring, and I think one of the things that I learned from that is just that the students there just did not have great access to good education. I grew up in Nebraska, and all we had was public schools, and all we had were great public schools. So I kind of learned here that there wasn't that access, and I wanted to learn more about what it meant to be in that classroom, the needs of the students, the needs of the school, which is why I joined Teach for America. And one of the reasons I insisted on wanting to teach in New York City, I actually was originally assigned to St. Louis and wanted to do New York City, was because Joel Klein, the chancellor there, is just so reform oriented, and I really wanted to be a part of that. So my first year taught high school math and one course of Chinese. My second year became math team leader in addition to the teaching, and also was data specialist for the school. And so because we were in a small high school, we had about 400 students, it gave the staff an opportunity to take leadership roles, and I just kind of jumped at the opportunity, wanted to work with my fellow colleagues and really kind of develop the types of things that we wanted to see in the classroom. From there, I kind of always knew that teaching wasn't my forte. I'm not, I don't want to kid myself. I'm not made for the classroom, so I kind of knew that 2 years was probably the limit for me. And so after that, started looking for things that would give me a better sense of what the bigger picture was in education. In your classroom, you're really just focused on your kids. You're the owner and the leader of that classroom. But I wanted to learn more about the operations of the school. What are the other things that are affecting our educational state? And so started with the Department of Education centrally in the Division of School Support and Instruction, which is the arm of the DOE that manages the schools, basically. We have 1,600 schools, 1.1 million students to serve. So to manage that range of schools, it's broken down into 60 networks, and each network is basically the main line of support for 250 schools. And so we manage that, and I started out as an associate and was kind of in charge of it kind of ran the gamut. I was basically assistant to the chief of staff of the division, and was given the opportunity to write something that we called DSSI Weekly, which is the main newsletter to the networks, telling them, these are the priorities, this is everything, and kind of moved from that position. Every couple of months, kind of something new came up, and in the program it says I'm director of special projects, and what that means is that I kind of 60% of my time I act as kind of the manager of all the different things that we have implementing in schools, and then the other 40% of my time I spend on continue to work on communications, working on figuring out how we reduce the time that Central is having principals spend on mandates, so things like we need you to fill out these lunch forms. We need you to report this and that compliance item. And now I am Chief of Staff to the Deputy Chief Academic Officer. His role is he's in charge of instructional coherence for the entire city. He is in charge of all of the kind of instructional policy initiatives. And so my role in that is making sure that I kind of understand all of those policies, but making sure that we're able to implement in schools. And so a lot of it is taking those ideas and figuring out how are we going to prioritize, how are we going to project manage, and how are we actually going to make this something that is going to impact our students. And so the instructional things that we're working on, we're in charge of the Office of Post-Secondary Readiness, so making sure that every student graduates not just with a high school diploma, but they're able to do something with that. They're able to go into careers, or they're able to go into colleges. We're also in charge of school programs and partnerships, which means that we look externally to figure out what can we provide for the students that way, and we're also in charge of academic quality, making sure that everything is going well in the schools, and achievement resources, which means making sure that we're going out there and able to provide professional development to our teachers. So
fantastic. Yep. Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Chang. I graduated from the college in 2001 and feel a little old, but our 10-year reunion is this year, and I can't believe it's been 10 years. I will admit, my fourth year, I was an English major. I almost had a major in South Asian languages and civ, except I didn't have room to take Hindi. I wanted to do that because it's the time to do it. So if you're in your fourth year, take classes that have nothing to do with your major, because there's never a time you'll be able to do it again. I admit I had no idea what I wanted to do. So for those of you who still don't know what to do, if you're in your third year, you still have some time. Even your fourth year, you have a little bit of time. My thought process to becoming an educator was this. I don't know what I want to do. My friends are becoming consultants or investment bankers. I don't have a strong enough math background to do that. So what's the job that will have the least amount of politics and I won't have to BS as much? And I thought, that's being a teacher, which, by the way, that's totally wrong. There's politics everywhere you go. Like the speaker said at lunch, know the political climate of wherever you work. And then I thought, well, I want to be a teacher, but I have all these loans because I just finished signing all my promissory notes off. That's the thing you do at the end of the year. Here's how much money you owe after 4 years of not having to pay for anything. So I thought, I can't pay for a teaching degree or for classes, so what do? I thought, well, who can pay for my degree? For those of you who are interested in teaching, I highly recommend the alternative certification route, or a program that will help you pay for your degree and help with your certification. I will admit I applied to Teach for America and they rejected me. So I thought, well, what then? Because I didn't really know what else to do. And I had a friend who is currently living in New York. She said there's a program called New York City Teaching Fellows, and it's very much like TFA. And I later found out that the TFA founder, Wendy Kopp, actually met with people in New York City. They want to replicate that idea for specifically the city. The interview process was the same. I applied, I got in. Yes, someone pays for my degree, I can get certified, I can have a job. I was excited. I taught in the Bronx, starting with 8th grade middle school. That was not my intent. I wanted 4th grade because I thought, 4th grade seems to be a good grade. They're not too cynical and they're not pooping in their pants, so I'll go with 4th grade. And it's not a big testing year, so I'm good. And they put me in 8th grade ELA, performing arts, in a failing school that was pretty rough. I spent 3 years teaching at MS 143. It's now closed. It closed the year after I left. Probably the hardest job I've ever had. It was very intense, and for those of you who want to follow up with what that's like, I'll talk to you about it after the panel. I decided to leave New York after my 3rd year, more for a personal life balance, because my life was work. And that's another thing, teaching, it will take up a lot of your time, to be very honest. It's a very hard job for people who say, oh, I want to take some time off and teach. Teaching is it's very time consuming. So for those of you who've heard people say that, or are actually considering that as this will be an easier route, it's not necessarily so, particularly if you're teaching in the inner city. I ended up coming back to Chicago because I was looking to go into a smaller school. I actually touched base with the career services at UFC, and they were very kind in connecting me with a number of people in the city. The principal at Kenwood Academy, Noble Street, that's where I eventually met Bill Olson, our facilitator. Perspectives. I visited Perspectives. That's where Joanna works at right now. And I ultimately ended up connecting with a person to help open up a small charter high school on the south side called Ace Tech. Then I actually ended up teaching at Noble Street High School, where I met Mr. Olson, because Mr. Olson was promoted to, teaching mode. Yeah. He was promoted to principal, and I took over his position, which was junior English teacher. I think my time teaching at Noble Street was great. We can both speak to those experiences, and Bill gave me a great number of opportunities for me to learn and advance, and I decided to apply to a program called New Leaders for New Schools, which is a fast-track principal preparation program. I ended up interning at Kenwood Academy, which is funny because I had met Liz Kirby a few years ago before that when I was applying to be a teacher, and so she saw me and said, "Haven't I met you before or interviewed you?" I said, "I went to visit your school and you spent 2 hours talking to me about my life goals," which I appreciated. And I am currently starting my second year, or in the middle of my second year, being a principal at Octavio Paz Charter School. We are K through 8. We have about 440 students, 99% free and reduced lunch, 50% African American, 50% Hispanic. Second year has gone much better. Actually, Elaine, who's sitting in the second row, shadowed me for 2 days and was able to see a lot of what goes on in this school. But I would say my entire career after college has been in urban education. It's my passion. I wouldn't trade the experiences I've had for anything else. Teaching is, I think urban teaching is so critical to, if you want to start changing some of the things that are wrong with this country, that's the place to start. For me, it's when you can plant seeds of hope in kids who have very difficult lives, whose only time of peace and quiet and structure is at school, and years later they come back to you and say, "Remember that time when we were in junior English class and we did the commercials about Oedipus Rex?" Like, that's still stuck with me. Or when I have kids emailing from DePaul saying, "I'm sitting in my junior English class," which I'm thinking, that's not a good idea. Don't email on your BlackBerry during class. And we're talking about Oedipus Rex, and I'm really bored because I already learned this. And I replied, "Jaleesa, please do not email during your college class. It's a compliment, I think, but why don't you look for things to add to the conversation?" Things like those little moments to me testify that what I do is worthy, and that to continue the work that I do as an educator.
Okay, I'm Joanna McConnell. I graduated the college in 2008, and I graduated the urban teacher education.
Wait, you guys don't want to teach or what? No, seriously, what's the deal? We're not even done with the first person. Why not stay? Seriously, sit down. Come on, just stay. We're not even done with the first person. Seriously.
Teaching's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not that bad. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen next. We got people doing all kinds of different things. Like, there's lots going on. It's crazy. Don't leave yet. Come on, at least let her finish. At least stay till the end. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
And in 2009, I graduated the Urban Teacher Education Program, which is Chicago's, in many ways, Chicago's answer to TFA, but also is the representation of Chicago's education course, because there used to be an education school Chicago, and it was shut down for many reasons. The reason that I sort of entered teaching, it's a twofold reason. My third year, I spent the whole year abroad in Paris, which I highly recommend if any of you are second years and are looking into a full year study abroad programs. While I was there, I got the opportunity to teach English conversation classes in a high school there. And most of the students there, it was very much on the outskirts of Paris, were of Moroccan and Algerian and Portuguese descent, and they felt like second-class citizens. And it was very, very interesting to me at the time, taking what little I had known through work with NSP about urban schools in America, and sort of putting it together with this idea of these Parisian students in front of me who were very articulate, who were very deeply passionate about being French citizens, but felt that that was not reciprocated to them, and felt very much that the French education system dead-ended for them in trade school or in, a post-bac degree, which is a couple years after high school, and that they would have no chance of getting into college. And when I came back to Chicago, I put some serious thought into how I had arrived at what I had considered to be my satisfying life. I enjoyed Chicago a lot. And the whole of it was education. I attended a very excellent suburban public school, had AP courses all the way through, had all the support I needed that Kieran was talking about at the beginning. And so I sort of thought, what change do I want to make well, everyone should have access to what I had. You know, everybody should be able to go to these schools that result in access to Ivy League colleges if that's what you want, that result in programs that let you travel internationally. So I looked into UTEP, and I discovered that thankfully it wasn't going to just throw me in with no training. I knew from my experience in Paris that I didn't know what I was doing. I knew what I wanted, but not how to do it. You know, I could sit there and speak English all day, but I didn't know how to write a lesson plan. I didn't know how to deal with students who hadn't chosen to come to my classroom. And so what UTEP offers is a full year of theoretical, it is a Chicago course, theoretical courses. You do child psych, you do history of American education, you do theory of education, I get a lot of John Dewey. And then in your second year, what you do is 2 semester-long placements at schools. So my first placement was at Sawyer Elementary, which is a 100% Hispanic school. It's huge. It has 8 classes for every grade, K-8. Which is in Gage Park, a Chicago neighborhood. And then I did my second semester at Walter Reed Elementary School, which is in Inglewood, and is also a failing school, is currently being shut down for low enrollment, but low enrollment obviously causes there to be a lot of pretty serious problems there. So, and that's a 100% African American school. So I got to see both sides of that, you know, Chicago inner city education aspect. When I graduated, I took a job at Perspectives IIT Math and Science Academy, which is the 3rd school from the Perspectives Charter Network. Charter schools in Illinois, there's a limited number of them, of the charters that are issued, but the loophole is that a charter school can open up many different campuses. So we're on our 3rd. It's a young school. We're still growing. We don't have a senior class yet, so we don't know what our educational outcomes are going to be just yet. Interesting to find that out next year. And I'm, you know, a lot of people go into teaching, a lot of people from places like the U of C, with the idea of it as a springboard to other things. I'll be a teacher for a few years, then I'll be, you know, an AP, then I'll be a principal, then I'll run the Department of Education, and I'll change everything, which is a nice dream. I would love to sit in Artie Duncan's chair, although I really wouldn't be able to do his job.
It also happens to be what Candace is doing right now. So,
so I, on the other hand, after my first year was hooked. I don't see myself other than in the classroom for a long, long time. Now that may change, who knows, but I mean, what I draw from it, the absolute joy of being with children all day and of showing them things they don't know, showing them things they haven't even conceived of, watching them succeed, watching them persevere and try again and again despite all the challenges that they face is something I draw so much energy from. It is a huge, huge, you know, suck on your life. It's all the time. You know, before I came in here, I was on the phone with a parent. So you have to be prepared for that. I think it's unfortunate that it is this way in America, but if you want to do this well, you have to put in many, many, many hours outside of the classroom. The fact is that the kids in these schools themselves need more of a commitment than the job is set up for, so you need to be willing to make that commitment if you're going to feel successful in what you do. I don't know anybody who leaves my building when the bell rings. I don't know anybody who doesn't take work home over the weekend, but it's the most satisfying thing I've ever done. And the only reason I'm prepared for it is that I went through UTEP, so I'm perfectly willing to field questions about UTEP and suggest that you all look into that.
and then just, so thank you. And then we're going to we might want to jump straight into a few questions because we have the kind of other, the other sort of given questions, but we can jump back to those. We might take a few questions from the audience too, and then one in the middle here just to kind of, it's hot and kind of get the vibe going a little bit. One of the things I would say though, like this, if you think this panel is about like being just a teacher like you had in high school, and who feels, let's just get a show of hands, who feels like that's an issue at your house? Like when you think, hey, I might want to go into high school, your parents are like, why the hell did I send you to U of C if you just want to be a teacher, right? Raise your hand, come on, get them up there, ladies and gentlemen. Seriously, right? Like your parents are like giving you this pressure, well, why do you want to do that? I'm telling you right here, like, we're not here talking to you because we want more U of C people to be just teachers. We're here talking to you because we want smart, hardcore, like incredible, loving, caring, smart, analytical people out there changing the world in the educational sphere. Like any of these people here, wherever they went, any of the panels they went to when they were they would be changing, they would be killers in that world, or killers and lovers. I'm trying not to use only violent metaphors in my life. But they would be fantastic in any sphere. These are just super hardcore people who've chosen to be super hardcore in the educational sphere. And so that, I'm telling you right now, inviting you guys to think about it that way, because you may decide, I taught for 10 years. How did I get into teaching? I thought, well, I want to do politics. I want to do public policy. I want to do this kind of thing. The woman who I was dating, her twin sister's ex-boyfriend had taught over at a school on the southwest side and said, you should go there and volunteer. And I went and volunteered. And I spoke a little bit of Spanish, so the nun in charge of the school said, why don't you tutor this young woman and teach her English? I'm like, kidding me? You know, like, and just the intellectual challenge. If you know something and you know how you know it, but the intellectual challenge of trying to get someone else to know what you know is so hard. It's really hard. And so I would just say that some folks, once you get into this sphere of education, you're going to find the little piece of it or the thing of it that just excites you and ignites you and gets you going. And some people, it's spending time with kids and watching them grow and socially. Other people, it's that kind of really hard thinking about what are the pieces of this, like calculus. You know calculus? Well, try to get a kid who to know calculus. So there's avenues here and there's pieces here that are going to challenge you. So we just throw that out there as one of the exciting things, and one of the ways to maybe think about making this panel useful to you is that, and also true, I mean, that education is actually an area where there's growth and exciting things happening in this country, right? You know, so we've even got people who started off in the business world saying, hey, education, this is where it's at. So let's take a couple of questions from the crowd.
Who are you?
Who am I? Oh, I'm Bill. Hi, guys. I'm Bill. I'm the principal at Noble Street. These guys read the bio. I'm Bill. I'm the principal at Noble Street. I taught for 10 years in Chicago. I've been a principal for 6 years. I love my job. I'm so lucky. Really just humbled, and I loved it. I love teaching too. So just really lucky to get to do what I do every day. All right. So let's take a couple, and then we'll go to the kind of scripted questions again. Let's see what these guys are thinking.
I have a two-part question. I would like to end up in a classroom, but I'm kind of struggling figuring out how I want to get there. So I was wondering if you could give some suggestions as to what are good ways to get yourselves into a classroom for a lasting amount of time, as opposed to something like TFA, which is never 2 years. And on top of that, how important is a master's program?
Who's got that similar question? Who is thinking like, hey, I might want to actually get in front of kids. How do I do it with certification? What are some ideas? Okay, good. Who wants to start on that one?
Me. We'll start just putting UTEP on the table, and I have a sign-up sheet for people who are interested. They told me to bring it. Personally, the master's, I mean, the degree doesn't do me, I get a couple extra $1,000 a year. But the program, the route I took to get the master's was highly useful. There are a number of alternative certification programs, and I'll let Angela speak to that. But if I had not gone through the 2 full years of UTEP, I would not be successful in the room. Like, I would still be learning. I came in on my feet, and that was incredibly valuable to me. Getting a master's just to get the master's is not worth it. You have to get a master's that gives you actual training. Student teachers come to our school all the time, and they spend 6 weeks, 8 weeks, half-time, Wednesdays only. I mean, I got to teach full-time for several months before I even set foot in my own classroom. So a program with any element like that, where you get the hands-on experience, that's how you should do it, in my opinion.
I'd like to bounce off of that as the contrast, which is Teach for America. And I loved my time with Teach for America, so I highly encourage people to apply if you think that's right for you. However, if you want to be a teacher and that's what you think you want to do, I will say that I feel like I became a pretty decent teacher at the end of my 2nd year, and then I left. So I highly recommend doing the UTEP route, and that's not to put down Teach for America in any way, but if you think you want to be a teacher for life, I highly recommend that you get more than 6 weeks of training. And the TFA training is, you get 1 week of training, and then you literally go and teach summer school to kids who have failed 7th grade, or at least that's what I taught. And then people from Teach for America observe you, and you really learn on your feet, actually by doing. But you're also, and this is what I couldn't get over, you're also the summer school teacher for these 7th graders that need to pass. Yeah. So it's a mixed bag.
And one thing I would throw out there, and then for teachers, one piece too, CAPS. So I'm sure you guys know, everybody knows where CAPS is, right? Where is it now? I don't know. It wasn't, I don't know. So absolutely, you should go to CAPS. Like, I went to CAPS. Ms. Richmond taught me how to write a resume. Anna Lee is in the back, and so Anna Lee knows every single program that will get you in a certification or not a certification in the entire country, and she probably even actually knows the people who run those programs. I mean, they're phenomenal. So that's one piece. The other thing is you should apply. Like, if you were me, if I was sitting in that, like, I would apply to both of these and see what I got into, and then kind of work it out, because you could do TFA perhaps and then go back and do other training, or go to another school where you get different kinds of support. You can stay in teaching. It's the options are there, and the place where all those programs, like Teachers for New York, all that stuff, you just have to get in and apply. Like, you should, as smart and as hardcore as you guys are, you should be looking at 4 or 5 acceptances just like you were for college, saying, here's all the different options that I can do afterwards. There's no reason why. There's a million things out there now that weren't there when I was your age. So sorry.
Hope you're not bitter. Hope you're not bitter or resentful.
Yeah, a little bit.
I would have to say, just keep in mind it's the person and not the program, and that the U of C is an elite organization, and people who graduate with a U of C degree automatically puts you in probably about the top 10%, 15% of the nation. So you're not necessarily going to find the solutions in a program. And I think when I see candidates who start blaming the reasons why they weren't able to get resources, that's a red flag to me, because, as was mentioned at lunch, find your own resources and solutions if they're not provided to you in the company. And be a problem solver. Like, that's one of the #1 things I look for in teachers I want to hire. I also look at experience, but I've had to do some mid-year hires of people who are fresh off student teaching, which I admit, with currently what's going on in our school, I'm not looking for a lot of first-year teachers, but if I do, I want to know that they have the gumption and the problem-solving skills and the flexibility, and just being able, a very sharp learning curve, because it's a very fast-paced job. I happened to join New York City Teaching Fellows when NYU wanted to pay the Department of Ed a couple $1 million to participate, and so I got a free NYU master's, totally by accident. I had excellent professors. They correlated our curriculum with what we were doing in the classroom. I did do a lot of learning on the job, and typically your first year of teaching, you're fighting to keep afloat. Doesn't mean you won't get results. Second year, you start getting into your groove. Third year, that's really when you start kind of being able to go on autopilot. That's with any job, I feel. But I want to caution you that, other people who did do New York City Teaching Fellows but did it through another university had a totally different experience, where they did their thesis paper in about an hour and turned it in 20 minutes before it was due, and she got an A. And it was through City Colleges of New York. She was still a phenomenal teacher, and that to me speaks, it's not necessarily the program that shapes the person, but the qualities that you inherit. Are you going to take advantage of opportunities that are offered to you? Are you going to seek out other learning experiences? Or are you going to learn from as many people as possible? That is ultimately going to shape who you are as a teacher. New York City Teaching Fellows, I think their applications are being accepted January and February. Teach for America is another. I work pretty closely with a lot of program directors who are outreach support for teachers, in addition to instructional coaches I have in my school. I have a lot of respect for their organization. It's hit or miss. It depends on the person. Like, I have strong Teach for America candidates in my school. I didn't renew a couple Teach for America people last year. And to me, it's the person and what they choose to bring to the table, as opposed to, well, their TFA, they're great, or their TFA, they're always going to be bad. UTEP is another option. I know Inner City Teaching Corps is another option. Depending on state per state, if you're willing to go out of state, I know several other states have alternative teaching programs if you want to research it. And that's another way to go about it. Or you could go the traditional route in taking a master's. And again, some master's courses are going to offer fundamentals that you will need to know as a teacher. It may not be as quick as you want it to be, but ultimately it's like a driver's license. Just because you have a driver's license doesn't mean you're a good driver. But you need the driver's license so that you can drive. It's the same thing as being certified as a teacher.
Well, and I found certification thing to be super frustrating. I taught for 10 years uncertified. I just found it to be really difficult to find a great program, so a great way to do it, because I was teaching Catholic schools, charter schools, doing this whole business, because and I couldn't ever go to the traditional CPS school down the street and work there because I wasn't certified. You know, so I do think sometimes programs like TFA or UTEP that'll get you certified while you're going through the program are really valuable, because who knows? You just don't know. You might think, hey, I just want to teach a couple years, but you don't know. Like, you may end up like wanting, and definitely I think, let me throw this question out there. Who knows, they want to have something to say about education policy and the way people are educated in this country. Who wants to be on that stage? Who wants to be able to talk about that and have people... Only 7? That's crazy. So like 10? Okay, so those people, that's a good debate to have, right? Like, do you want to be a teacher who has some classroom experience and pull on that experience when you talk about it, or do you want to go another route? Both are fine, but it's just really thinking about it. If you don't want to do some teaching, it doesn't hurt to be certified. Let's take...
I do want to say one more thing about Teach for America. I was a 2007 core member, and after our 2-year commitment, 70% of our core went back to the classroom. They went back for a 3rd year, and I think the numbers now are they're about 60%.
So the training is so good now in a lot of ways, but then UTEP's training is great too.
Right,
so,
and I would echo the sentiment of it's not the program, it's the person. I have a master's degree. It's a free master's degree from Teach for America from Pace University, but I wouldn't say that the instruction there was great, but it was really about getting together with my fellow teachers, talking about what was in the classroom and learning that way through the people I was with. And so it's not really necessarily the program, but it is what gets you certified. And I know that, I don't know if it's true in Chicago, but a lot of the charter schools in New York, they do, you don't have to be certified, so they hire people right out of undergrad, and they'll pay for your master's too.
We have to be 70% or 75% certified, so occasionally we'll hire somebody, but you'd have to be really good. So let's go. So we have some questions that our great organizers have said they wanted us to touch on that apply to everybody. So one is, what is the connection between what you're doing now and U of C? Okay, keep these in your mind, right? One is, because I'm going to let you vote. Okay, connection between what you're doing now and U of C, or what's most challenging and most rewarding about your job. Okay, think about it. Ready? Because we're going to vote in a second. So connections or challenging and rewarding. Okay, we're ready? Ready to vote? Okay, raise your hand. Everybody has to vote. Nobody gets to, on these other questions, some people are like, no, this is your life, so decide. Who wants connections between now and U of C?
Oh, it's like half.
Okay. Who wants challenging, rewarding? Oh my God, it's a tie.
We could do both.
So here we go. So so we'll go. Who wants to? Half of us will do connections, and half of us will do challenging, rewarding. Curran, what would you like?
Sure, I'll start with challenging and rewarding.
For 500.
I'm just slightly different perspective from everyone here, since I think I'm sort of the only for-profit person here. I think being a for-profit person in education, and this is just something that you should be mindful of if that's of interest to you, is to understand that in education there's a huge bias against for-profit. So be mindful, and part of it is reasonable too. I think a lot of people look at education and say, okay, here's a great business opportunity, and they forget that at the end of the day you still have to be an educator. Whether it's not your profession, you still have to care about the education that you're delivering. And so, for example, when we started our company, we built a product for the retail market, and then we tried to take it into schools without really having understood exactly what we had to do. And one of the biggest transformations that we've made over the last 2 years, and I mentioned this earlier on, is really thinking about how do you support all the people that are already doing great things, because I think there's sometimes this mindset that teachers' unions are bad or so-and-so is bad. I think no one at this table and very, very few people in education, if anyone, got into education because they thought they'd make a lot of money, or they thought it'd be a really easy way to make money, right? I think both of those are really not the case. If there are things you'd like to do in your life to make money, I think we can suggest a lot of them. There are some other panels here that you could visit. So I think
we did say this is the most fun panel, not the most lucrative panel.
So I think if you are interested in the for-profit world, really think about what are the problems you can solve. Think about how do you make everyone's lives better. So not only how do you help students, how do you help instructors, how do you help administrators, how do you help publishers, and sorry, there was a rewards portion.
Challenging and rewarding, yeah.
Most rewarding is, and actually this is something that I would think for educators, I think the most rewarding thing you can do is when you're actually seeing an individual student face-to-face improve. And I think as your organization grows, as you might leave the classroom and enter a more administrative or managerial role, whether that's in a not-for-profit or a for-profit setting, I think that direct reward of seeing an individual student improve goes away. And you have to remind yourself that while you may not, as your career progresses or as you decide not to be in the classroom or in a face-to-face environment, just keep reminding yourself that if your impact continues to be big, it doesn't have to be something you feel every day, but make sure that you don't ever lose that connection with your students. I mean, our office is decorated with pictures of students using our program. We have students come in and we throw pizza parties for students who do really well, because it's really important to remember that at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, whether it's for profit and you're trying to build a really large business, you're educating, and just remember that that's the best reward. Seeing someone master and learn something, seeing that look of, wow, I get it, I don't know how to explain, that's the most amazing thing you can be doing.
Somebody want to jump in on connections or challenging or rewarding?
I have something about connections. So I think that teachers are kind of like the ultimate project managers. You go into your classroom, you have to balance lesson planning with, classroom management, with grading, and all these different things. And there are all of these kind of moving parts in your classroom. And so I think that my kind of basis of project management came from the University of Chicago, because you come from this intense environment where you have to juggle all your classes and your assignments and problem sets and doing all these different activities, and inherently you're prioritizing and you're managing your time. And I think that this Chicago experience is really where you kind of get that innate sense of like, how am I going to implement? How am I going to manage? And I think that was a really critical part of my experience here.
And then, gentlemen, hold up. We'll let these guys go too if they want to go, since those guys went. You guys ready, or are you going to stay?
I was going to ask a question, but you guys didn't call us.
Oh, no, well, come on in and ask it. Come on, well, you'll be next. It's still going. Come on, buddy. We'll get you. There we go. We got him back. Come on in. You'll get...
Can I ask you right now?
No, yeah, in a second. Come on. We'll get to you. Come on. Oh, let's give it an aw, everybody. Oh, he missed his question. You guys want to go too? Go. All right. There you go. Yeah, I don't want to end up smacking everybody, but I wanted to at least make sure that we got the panel and everybody could introduce. So it's good.
It actually speaks to the point where if you want to get an education, you have to really have a passion for it, because you're going to take a lot of lumps and bumps. And at the end, this is what I tell when I interview fresh teachers, totally new teachers. I tell them, you have to really think about, at the end of the day, is what you believe you're doing, is that worth the lumps and the bumps? And so, sitting in that panel, obviously, it's not their passion. I respect that. I think being able to identify what your passion is, and I think if you find that education, if you get into a career of education, you find that it's not your niche, I think it's better, especially if you're working with children, for you to be honest with yourself and to leave the profession and choose another profession, rather than torture yourself, affect the lives of kids, and just force yourself to finish it for the sake of finishing it. Granted, I say that, and I really don't like mid-year hires, but I respect the teacher who's very honest and reflective and saying, you know what, I think I can better serve people in this way, and teaching is not the best way. I respect that a lot. I wanted to speak about connections. UFC is famous for knocking down. If you think you're on your high horse, you get knocked off. And I remember my first quarter, I thought I was smart, and I thought, boy, am I dumb. But it's interesting, like, you get knocked down, you get a paper back and from your human professor, and they say, like, argument not valid. And you're like, what do you mean the argument? Okay, that doesn't make sense. But then it's interesting, like, that critical, I don't want to say attack, but the kind of critical approach they take to refining your practice, to you write a lot and you get criticized a lot. But I feel that is the portion, like, being able to take that feedback and think, okay, what do I have to do next? And I think by the time you're in your fourth year, you think, how do I make it better? How do I make it better? What are the questions I need to ask so I can anticipate this? And you learn to try to figure out what are all the angles. That is a very valuable skill in whatever job you have, particularly when you have 38 students in front of you, because then you have 38 children who want to ask you questions, who will have issues, and your objective is to get through a lesson. And trying to focus and not being able to, again, manage projects, manage tasks when so-and-so has gum on their shoe and is throwing a fit in the corner and refuses to work while so-and-so just managed to rip their pants, and you have to get through this lesson because there's 10 minutes left and they're about to go to lunch. And how do you figure out all those angles? That's, the hard work that you go through as an undergrad. That's, excellent preparation as your first few years of teaching.
Which you will cry. If you teach your first year, you will cry. And you're lucky if you don't cry in front of kids. And it's okay if you do cry in front of kids.
Because it shows you care.
Yeah, right. And I think part of the other thing, just to continue on the connection piece, I would throw out there is, you know, I remember when I was at Prosby, and I'm from Montana, so I didn't really, I'm walking around about, and I said, well, I'm talking to this girl, and young woman who's at UC, and I said, well, why did you decide to go to UC? And she goes, I got into Princeton, but this place is harder. And it's like, you know, and I think that, you guys are a little, okay, so, you guys, all of us, right? It's that idea of I want to be in a place that's intense. I want to be in a place that's real. If I want to be doing something that matters. I want to be talking, you know, if I get killed in a class, it's because I wasn't, my paper wasn't good enough. And it's real. And I think that I did the political intern stuff. I was an intern in DC, and I just felt like the things that I was doing every day were not really real. They were not impacting people's lives in a real way. And I can tell you for certain, 15 years of doing this, I better be real with myself and my students, or things are not going to be good. And when they're not good, I've got to pick up the pieces. And that's just like UC, right? You go back to your dorm room, it's you. You know, and I think that's just one of the connections, but there's a ton. Who wanted to take connections or rewards challenges? Anybody else?
I can speak a little bit to connections. So I actually knew that I wanted to get into Teach for America my senior year of high school. That was pretty much my goal even heading into college. So I won't speak to how my volunteer opportunities and that type of thing led to Teach for America. But what I will speak to is, I think, two components of my current job in fundraising and in managing people that skills that I wish I had cultivated in college a little bit more. So those are, one, communication skills. So I mean communication verbally and written. I think any job you go into, especially as an educator, but I think any job that you go into from there, being a communicator, as the panelists mentioned earlier, is just essential. So I think that's one. And the second would be learning how to manage other people and motivate other people. I think that's a really necessary skill, specifically in the classroom, to motivate a bunch of 7th graders that are thinking about a million other things, and to try to get them to do what you want them to do. And I think taking on as many leadership opportunities as possible, extracurricularly within your classes, is the way to cultivate those communication and management skills. So that's what I wish someone had told me when I was in college.
Well, let's open it up to a few more questions then, because I bet you guys have some good stuff on your brains. Who wants to start? Questions? For anybody specifically, or for the panel in general? Come on.
I guess you mentioned this a little bit briefly earlier, but I'm more interested in the policy side of education. So I'm curious.
Who here is interested in the policy side of education? We all are. Yeah, absolutely. We just feel like we're impacting policy in the things that we do every day. Yeah.
So I guess I'm more interested in going into research or working for the Department of Education or something. But I'm curious if any of you guys could speak to whether you think it's a good idea to have some teaching experience first, and what are the pros and cons of going straight into more research?
This is kind of yeah. I mean, this is a question that kind of comes up every year, and I'll give my biased piece on it, and then you guys can talk about I definitely and sometimes on the panel is one of the folks from you're in a great position to do policy, and in fact try to right now to go to the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research. You know who they are, and find out, ask if you can carry water around for them or make coffee, because they're super smart. They're the best in the world. So I would say for sure, if you really love this kind of thing, get over there to the consortium. Sarah, there's a ton of, Annalie can hook you up with a million people over there, and that's one way to think about it. Me personally, I mean, I don't think it really matters. If somebody's going to tell me about what's happening in the country, then I don't care if they were a teacher or not. If somebody's going to tell me how to run my school or how to teach, then they better have been a teacher. So kind of that's kind of my bias, but I'll throw that out. That's a good question. Anybody?
I think there's a lot of, I would want anybody who's giving me my education research, I would want them to be familiar with schools. like Bill, I wouldn't say, you know, you must have 5 years of teaching experience, because then I'm going to be like, why did you leave? But we need you. No, there are so many ways to be connected to schools to see what's going on that you do not need a degree, you do not need certification. Okay, like we have tutors from DePaul and IIT at my school. You know, we ask people to come in. I have my kids do interviews. We have our kids go and do externships during February when they're seniors in high school. So the neighborhood schools program at Chicago is a great way to get involved.
Who's doing that one? Neighborhood schools?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things you can do that help kids and give you that perspective on schools that do not require you to get a degree first.
I think your question was it, I just want to clarify, it was just thoughts on having experience before you need to go in the classroom, or just first-year teachers, correct?
No, it was, she wants to do research.
Right.
Should she go into teaching if she eventually wants to do research?
I think it helps. I think, you know, I've worked with people who do work for the consortium, and some of them have never been in the classroom, but they have another perspective to it, and I respect that. I agree with Bill. If you want to walk in and give me ideas on how to improve my school, I would prefer that you would have actually experienced what it's like to be in a school. I don't know if I should answer the other question of whether or not we should send people in without experience, or if that's for another part of the panel.
Yeah.
But.
Can I say something? Sorry.
Sure, and then Karen, yeah.
So I actually do some work. It's not research, but my current position is not in the classroom, but it's working very closely with 16 high schools. And in my experience, working with colleagues that do not have classroom experience, they are still very good at their jobs and are still very able to excel, but there definitely is a disconnect with some of the teachers that we're working directly with, where they really like the fact that I've spent 2 years in the classroom and that I know what that's like. So I do think that if you're working directly with schools and with teachers, there is an understanding from people that have been in the classroom that my colleagues tell me, I don't know how that is, but my colleagues tell me they don't feel like they're able to make that connection in the same way.
So I actually have a stronger opinion about this. I think it's absolutely necessary for you to have some type of idea of what happens in a school. Again, it's not that you have to have taught, but I think it's so important to at least understand what is going on in the school. My job is kind of two-pronged, where we're in there and kind of giving advice to schools about how to run, and then there's also kind of the broader policy aspect of it. And one of the things that we're battling within the DOE is surveys, which is a very weird thing to battle. But if every single division wants to survey principals about, you know, how are your lunch form collection things going?
I don't do any of those. I do none of them.
So, you know, so we have 8 different departments or 8 different divisions, and in there's 10 different offices. That's already 80 surveys that a principal has to complete in a day, and it's.
Angela doesn't do them either. I know she doesn't do them. You don't do them. We don't do them. We just.
But I feel bad about it.
I don't. I feel good about it.
And you know, the role of the principal is to be the instructional leader of the school, and if they're spending all their time doing surveys, it doesn't make sense. So you need to have somebody who has an idea of how a school operates to understand that, to realize that you can't be mandating all these things, because if you mandate for 100% of their time, then the principal has to spend 200% of their time, which, I mean, I'm sure you do anyway, on your job. And then for the broader policy perspective of it too, I think it just is helpful to understand the challenges of, you know, the teacher, the principal. And again, I guess I can't get off of the survey thing, but we have a consulting firm that is doing kind of a broader project on how the Common Core, it's a new state standard system, how the Common Core professional development we're doing for schools is affecting the schools and how it's improving it. And they're surveying all teachers, and it's just like just like that operational thing. You have to kind of get a sense of what a school is like to understand what would make sense for your research, what types of structures would
And
help.
Kern, did you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. I was just going to add one thing, which is, I don't know why this happens in education, and it's actually where we need to have the best research of all the things we could research in the world. You'd think education is one of the most important ones, but sadly it seems like very few people with good statistical backgrounds go into educational research.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind how many times I read educational research where people do not understand the simple concept that causation and correlation are two different things. I'll give you an example. There was research which our University of Chicago published, which blew me away that University of Chicago would do this, but it basically said the more time students spend getting help on an area, the lower their scores. And I was just like, well, first of all, logically that makes no sense.
Right.
But that's like saying people who take a lot of drugs are sick. Well, they're taking drugs because they're sick in the first place. So I just ask that if you do decide to pursue research, please, please, please help your colleagues in the field learn a little bit of statistics. And I would say the one other problem I see with educational research is, and this is hopefully not offending anyone here on the panel, is there's a tendency in education to view your situation as too unique. Everyone thinks, I am, well, you don't know what my district is like. We have this percent of this and this percent of that. So clearly if this solution works somewhere else, it can't work for us.
And we won't even try.
And it's an incredibly frustrating problem because what happens is it makes it really difficult for good ideas to scale. Because there are so many opportunities for someone to be a naysayer. I'll give you a great example. We have programs in pretty much every state in the country at this point. We work with the state of Maine, we're a preferred vendor for the state of Kentucky. We have 35 schools in CPS. We had the state of Indiana begin a pilot program with us. We had 5 schools in the state, and we went down to a school that was right on the border with Kentucky. It was the last school that we were working with, and at the end of our little demo, we had about 25 students in the computer lab. The principal says, well, this is great, but it doesn't work for our students. And I said, okay, who are your students? He said, well, we have an urban population here. I said, well, we work with all these
Chicago,
schools in CPS. We have Portland, Maine. We have all these other schools. He said, well, no, those are big urban settings. We're a small urban setting. So I said, okay, well, we have schools in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Portland, Maine. He said, oh, but, Fort Wayne is, and this is in Indiana. He says, well, that's not really like us. And I said, okay, is there any other district you could think of that would replicate you? He said, just one. He said, are you in Evansville, Indiana? I said, no. He said, well, then it wouldn't work here. So just be mindful of that.
What? So, so also another, I don't know if that story is meant to illustrate. So we need lots of smart people in education, like lots of critical people in education. We really do. I think there's a lot of things wrong with the system and the way things work in the country, but definitely people who are analytical, like the people in this room, it's really, really important. The other thing you end up, once you jump in that world, then you got to work on your own social skills and figure out how to, I don't want to tell that story, so but it's about me. You basically, sometimes too, you come into the scene and you're actually probably a little more intelligent than the person, and then you end up hurting their feelings. They don't want to work with you. That's not great, right? So then there's things like that, which I'm sure Curran didn't hurt that person's feelings. I'm just trying to move on to kind of extrapolate here a little bit. So who's got another burning question? Okay, just a regular question then.
What would you recommend going into education could you major in at the University of Chicago that would most prepare you for your future in education?
Not English.
Really? I would say English.
I love it.
I knew that was going to be the answer, so I would not say English, but
Really? Oh, then you get to start.
in my opinion, when I look at teachers, I kind of don't care what you majored in. Well, if you majored in kinesiology, I would... I always look at the college. I look at experience if you have any. I've looked at, I'm always interested just from a personal background what you decide to major in. I just hired a 3rd grade teacher about a month and a half ago because the teacher resigned. She majored in modern dance at Columbia, which is quite competitive, was a classically trained ballerina. I think, I don't want to generalize, but I would think most principals would probably see that and go, how are they going to teach 3rd grade? And for me, I need to fill the position. And it was fascinating talking about her thought process about why she was a modern dance major at Columbia, what she took from being a ballerina. She did end up getting her master's in education, and we talked a bit about that. But I think college is the time, and I know your parents probably don't want you to hear this, it's the time to really take advantage of what you really want to learn. I don't think my English degree or all the courses I took in South Asian literature really helped me to be a teacher. Like, it sounds cliche, but I really think it's the fact that U of C forces you to take so many classes out of your discipline and forces you to be uncomfortable in so many different ways, socially, emotionally, academically. And if you can survive that and learn how to navigate that, that is, I can only speak for myself. I don't really care what you majored in. Honestly, when I see people who have undergrad majors in education, my question is, so how are you going to, what does that mean? Like, did you study any content? Like, if you're supposed to be teaching science to fourth graders, do you really know the science enough? Like, were you really pushed? So I would say, like, well, what is your major?
I'm probably doing sociology.
Okay. I mean, I think pretty much any major at the U of C is going to
Yeah.
prepare you in that way, but I don't think just because you majored in math doesn't mean you can't be a teacher. Just because you majored in, I don't know,
Sociology
fundamentals.
doesn't mean- right, fundamentals, yeah.
You know.
I was kidding about English. It's a great major.
No, but what is it?
I was really kidding.
Really? Oh, what is it that you think? So you just think it doesn't?
No, I completely echo everything that was just said. I just don't think it matters that much. So I think English is one that I've heard a lot. Oh, if you want to go into education, English is a great major to have. I loved my English major, but I don't think that I agree with everything that's just said.
Yeah, I mean, one thing too, you may or may not, right? And I mean, certainly be interested in hearing. Well, actually, no, I know it's true. So, so for sure, U of C definitely. If you have a U of C resume and you write a good resume, you're gonna get a look. Mm-hmm. Like, you're gonna get a call. You're gonna get a call in almost every job that you're pretty kind of qualified for. You're gonna get a call. So then the thing is, what do you do with that call? And I think the piece back to the ballerina, we look all the time. I mean, we look all the time at people who are achievement spikers. Like, man, like, this person nailed this thing. Like, there was one teacher who got hired. I'm telling you, this turned out to be one where we kind of it wasn't my hire, but we kind of overwent on the achievement spiker. She was like the state of, I forget exactly which state, was like state of Arkansas ping pong champion. And she just killed in ping pong, and everybody, so everybody's like, ooh, she's an achiever, and that's an achievement spiker, So if you're good, if you can achieve and do things, then you're driven, right? You're going to be an achiever in whatever you go into. That's what we're looking for. I mean, all of us are now at the spot, where we're also looking for the best colleagues to come work with us, so we're looking for people who achieve, right, who make things happen.
I would say the only exception to what I've heard my panelists say is that if you are interested in secondary education, if you're interested in any kind of AP work, for science and math, you are going to get an extra second look if you actually have a science or math degree.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. That's going to give you a competitive edge because there are so few people who graduate with science and math degrees who want to go into education.
Yeah. Are there folks like that, science and math folks, who are thinking, boy, I don't know, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and now I'm not sure what I want to do, right? Like, it really is true. Back to the piece about the joys and rewards of being a teacher. It's phenomenal. Like, it's an incredible life when kids are learning things that you taught them. It's amazing. Like, so I do think there's that piece, and it is true. U of C bio, U of C chem, Angelina, I'll call you, right?
Yes, I'll take a look at you.
Yeah.
Know your strengths. Know your strengths. I was an English major, and I also taught social studies and algebra and geometry, and so when people ask, what do you teach? I said, well, I teach kids, but I teach everything because I felt like what I was forced to do at U of C, biology was it was not a cake ride. Calculus was no cake ride. I can't think of any class that was a cake ride except for maybe drama 101. But
I don't think anybody in here even knows what a cake ride is. Because these classes are hard, right?
I can't necessarily recall exactly what I learned in second quarter calculus, but I do know that, because I don't do calculus now, but I do know the process that I had to work through those problems. That kind of perseverance and flexibility and problem solving is exactly what you need to be a teacher. So if you do end up in a high school and you are suddenly thrown a course which like Candace, like, I am not prepared to teach this course. You start typing your little words into the internet and trying to find resources. There's this great thing called the internet. It bewilders me when I have teachers who are like, I don't know how to teach verb tenses. Really? Well, if you don't know, go on the internet and find a solution to your problem. Whether it's asking 3, then me, or that's a teacher joke, or going on the internet, like problem solve. Like you're not going to know everything. Just like they said at lunch, you're not going to know everything. You're going to have to learn new content because you don't know. Your principal, and I don't do this to my teachers, might say, "Hey, it would be a great idea if you taught, let's see, Swahili. Let's start a Swahili program and you're going to be the teacher." Granted, that would never happen. But just, you never know what's going to get thrown at you. So what you have to do, you have to learn very quickly on the job and seek help when you need it.
So one more question that's, actually, you know what, let's stop. Let's take it. There, go for it. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask about the difference between having a career as a teacher versus having a career as a principal.
Okay.
What it's like to be a principal.
Yeah. So
is it a special career or is it sort of an extension of being a teacher?
yeah, it's special. Right? It's special, right?
It's different. It's a different sphere. And again, you have to know what you want to do.
You're running a business,
right,
and you're educating kids. So you have a $5 million budget. You have to hire people. You need to manage them. You need to think about the instructional leadership piece and understand how you do your staffing. You deal with parents. I mean, it's a phenomenal job. So I think it's definitely very different from teaching, and I'm also really glad that I got to teach a long time. And I love it. I mean, it's phenomenal. And then there's been times when I've been here and people have asked, and it was really tough and hard, and I still loved it. But I mean, it is amazing. I'm telling you, like the things that I get to see, and then the idea, like one of the things people ask about, like Joy, is like of what you do. I mean, like I see some of the best teachers I've ever seen in my life, and I got to hire them. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, that's incredible, So, yeah. And the last piece is advice. So we don't have a ton of time, but let's think for a second. One piece of advice that our panel, are you guys up for advice? Feel like a little advice? Okay. All right. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
Go into the workforce knowing that that you are not better than anyone. And understand that you will learn something from everyone you meet in every single situation, whether it's a boring meeting, what you think is useless. Be a sponge, as they mentioned. Her speech was, she ripped it out of my mind. I thought, exactly, be a sponge. If you become a teacher, your custodian is not below you. Your custodian works with you. You can learn a lot from the people who may not have gone to the most prestigious colleges, may not have a college degree, but those kinds of relationships you form with people, you never know where they're going to lead you, and you can always learn something from everyone.
I would say start to accustom yourself to making mistakes and fixing them. It's not something I was used to in high school, and it wasn't really something I was used to in college either, but whatever you do, it's going to be harder, and you need to know how to recover, and sometimes that means apologizing. Sometimes that means owning up to something really stupid or really problematic that you may have done, and sometimes that just means going back and doing it again, and you got to learn it.
Advice, consejos.
Mine would just be, you guys are part of the lucky few. I know you said top 10, 15%. I'm a little biased. I think you guys are the top 0.1, if not 0.001%.
Right here.
And I think that you've been incredibly fortunate in your lives to receive this kind of education. I mean, a lot of us here could have gone to other schools other than the University of Chicago, other schools with a similar brand or similar level of prestige. But I think what University of Chicago is about is really best idea wins. It's how do you take those ideas and how do you put them into the world and how do you change the world. So all I ask, whatever field you go into, whether it's education or something else, is be the best at it. Be amazing. We all go through ruts in our lives. When you start working, you realize that you reach a speed bump and you realize, okay, my skills have to get upgraded. But just be relentless in your pursuit to be amazing at whatever you do. And especially if you choose to do that in education, because the number of lives and the number of people you get to impact, that will be reward in and of itself. So in the words of Bill, be a killer.
I I think that my piece of advice would be to really just take ownership of what you're doing, and no matter how small a project or how big a project, really take that project and make it your own. I mean, something is, I started doing a newsletter, and it's something that I really kind of took as my little child and kind of tried to revolutionize it so that it was something that was really useful. And I think that really feeling like you own that project, and even though you're low on the totem pole, and really trying to improve it, and always kind of reflecting on that and making sure that you're always trying to push yourself to improve and make a difference.
I did a Metcalf in New York City, and I remember the woman who supervised me at my Metcalf said that the biggest advice she had for me going into the workforce was, this was my first day at the Metcalf, so it wasn't like I was dishonest, because her advice was always be honest in the workforce. And I think that I've gone back to that a lot, and it sounds really distant and easy, but going back to the point where you make a lot of mistakes and you sometimes want to just cover them up and not tell anybody and just brush past it, and it probably won't matter anyway. But I think that has really served me well, to just be honest, period.
And then I'll go with, there's tons of things, and we'll be here to chit-chat on the way out too, but I'll go with exercise. Because I do think, definitely, like, as a high school kid, I exercised all the time, and then I just was all the time in the reg and in Harper, and I didn't exercise as much. And then once I got in the work world, like, I realized, like, stress management and health, like, you really got to exercise. So exercise, that would be one. The other piece, just kind of echoing what I've had, just to put it even more strongly, like, make great copies. So, like, if you're in your beginning grunt job, whether it's education or whatever, make great copies. Like, do it just right. Whatever you're doing, do the very best you can, because then, a lot of times we'll get new people or interns or whatever, and they'll want to suddenly, like, tell you everything they think about the organization. But it's like, yeah, I know that you probably think that, and I really don't care. But the person who makes great copies, I'm interested in what they think. So, like, or the person who does, like, that grunt, just know you're starting at the bottom. It's great to start at the bottom. Like, here, do this project. I'm sure there were probably 5 people at the job who were like, who were saying, man, I'm glad I didn't get that stupid newsletter. Like, that's a garbage job. Here, Candace is like, man, I'll make that newsletter the best newsletter in the world. And that's, like, whatever it is, where you're starting off, to quote Kern, be a killer. Violent teacher panel. Hey, thank you, everybody. And then, thank you.